I find challenging around the messaging about what you need to, drive this, wear this, all those things. They'll make you happy. They'll make you rich. They'll make you beautiful. All of those things have a subtext message, which is if you don't drive this, wear this, have this phone, you're not good enough. And we're very sensitive to this stuff. Our brains are wired to be sensitive around self-worth because self-worth, we're social hierarchical mammals. These things, these messages resonate with us. So as you just said, if I have a bad day trading, does that make me a bad person? Does it make me a failure? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my wife? Am I going to lose my family? Because we won't be able to afford this. The brain can spiral off into this catastrophizing space really, really quickly. Because reactive processes will always be safety orientated. And essentially that's fight or flight or freeze. None of those are great actions, right? Not in front of a screen or even in the house or wherever it is. Fight, flight or freeze does not work with your finances.
Welcome to the Alpha Mind podcast with me, Stephen Goldstein, and my co-host Mark Randall, where we explore, discuss and examine the mental, psychological, emotional and behavioural challenges of working in trading and investing roles. Today we are delighted to welcome money coach Dennis Harhalakis. Dennis works with people in various roles, helping them to develop, understand and improve their relationship with money and to understand how that relationship comes to impact all aspects of their decision making and work processes. This episode highlights how we at Alpha Mind try and bring a range of different topics and perspectives to our audience to help them improve, grow and develop. And I think everyone who listens to this podcast and listens all the way through will realise how much their relationship with money impacts the way they work and the decisions they make. If you do enjoy this podcast and this episode in particular, we do ask you to go to whichever podcast service you use and please give us a rating and if possible even a review, and hopefully a good one. Before we start, a few words about our sponsor, the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA, and their brilliant Technical Analysis Home Study course. The Home Study course is an online version of the full programme which is taught at the London School of Economics. If you are keen to develop your technical analysis skills and take your knowledge and understanding of them to the very highest level, then this is the programme you should be considering. As one of the lecturers on the full programme, I am fully aware of the high quality of the Home Study course, which has been written in partnership with many leading figures from the world of technical analysis. And since the STA is a not-for-profit body with a history going back over 50 years, you can be certain their only agenda is your education, development and growth. We are delighted to announce that the STA are offering a discount on the full cost of the Home Study course and the Home Study course and Diploma Programme to listeners of the Alpha Mind podcast. To find out more about the Home Study course and how to get the exclusive Alpha Mind discount, visit the Alpha Mind blog page where you will find a link to the Home Study course at the top of the page. Go to alphamindblog.blogspot.com or just Google Alpha Mind blog. Now on with this week's podcast.
Well, welcome to this week's Alpha Mind podcast. We're delighted to have Dennis Harhalakis with us, a certified money coach. Dennis spent 30 years in financial services, much of that time with American Express, knows about trading, knows about money in particular and our relationship with money. And we're delighted to have him on the show this week, just to talk from a different perspective than normal. The show's about money. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great pleasure to be here. So a money coach. I'm a money coach. And money coaching is a framework for understanding how you think and behave around money so you can make better decisions, reduce anxiety and other negative emotions, and communicate in healthy ways. And those are all pretty good positive things. And I think that certainly in the areas that you work in, those are also things that you like to help people with.
Yeah, I'm going to throw a bit of a spanner into the works, this concept of money. I mean, the pandemic, has rather reawakened a different sort of concept of value. My wife is Spanish. She comes from a village in Spain, and they don't have money. They just barter with each other and share services. And I think actually I'm starting to see evidence of that here, where because of the fact we're a little bit more social connected now, because of the way we operate, we're starting to forget about money. And, to go to the hairdressers when we first allowed to have a haircut, didn't have any money in the house, had to go to a cash dispenser that I'd not been to for a year and take out 20 quid to go to the hairdressers. Has that impacted the concept of what you're trying to deal with and how you're dealing with it, or not really?
It certainly brought the whole focus on, let's say, financial well-being to the fore. So you touched on something there, which I think is quite interesting, the concept of going to a cash point and the different relationship you have with a transaction when you're handing over physical cash and when you're handing over a card or when you're waving your phone at it. So for years, I've always used credit cards. And in fact, of course, now, recently we've only ever been able to use credit cards. But I can't remember when it was, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, I went to go to Waitrose to buy something. And I didn't have my wallet with me. I didn't have Apple Pay set up or anything. All I had was 20 quid. And what I can tell you is it was a completely different experience for me going into Waitrose. So it sounds a bit middle class, doesn't it? But anyway, Waitrose, let's say the supermarket, with 20 quid, because normally I go and I look at I go, well, I can buy anything in here because I've got a credit card. But when I went in with 20 quid, it was very, very much more focused on what I needed to get, which was like 3 or 4 items. And I didn't spend time drifting around looking at the bog off deals and the discounted deals at the end of the aisles. I went in, I had 20 quid, I bought my 5 items and I left. So psychologically, I was in a completely different place. There's a micro loss moment when you hand over cash and get whatever it is that you're going to get from the person who's selling it to you, that just doesn't exist when you wave your phone at something or when you hand over a credit card. And that's all part of the psychology of understanding how we relate to money, what it is in terms of a physical construct, a mental construct, and how we can learn to manage our own neurological processes and emotions around money. So as an example of kind of how to go out and not spend a great deal of money, go out with 20 quid in cash. Or my friend, Fanny Snaith, who's a money coach, she puts her credit card in her sock, in her shoe. Now, it means you can get it out if she needs to. But she's put friction between herself and her spending activity. So she's not naturally going to go 5 drinks down and start waving it around. She has to go and get her shoe off. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it's a fascinating point I'm just thinking about there, because I'm trying to link this to trading, and obviously trading is a complete money-orientated activity, and yet the desire for money, the desire to produce income and return, often actually corrupts the process. And I'm seeing that similarity between how someone engages with making a simple purchase in the high street and how they act in the financial markets, because of the allure of money and because of their very personal relationship with money and what it means.
Yeah, so it's not a question of numbers. It's not a question of maths. If I look at my process of money coaching, it's not talking somebody through financial literacy. That is part of it, but it's not a question of like, how do I budget and how do I use an aggregator site? It's not that. Specifically, it's a question of how do I feel about myself? How do I feel about money? And how do I feel about money and myself? And that's the same whether you are talking about your personal finances or whether you're talking about a trading relationship. There's a purity, I think, in the sense of that when you're working for an institution or possibly even trading for yourself, there's a kind of that's different money from my own money. But in reality, the relationship between yourself and that money, the relationship you have with yourself, all plays out into the same space. So I'll give you a parallel example. I have had a couple of clients, 3 or 4 clients, for my money coaching services who are all small business owners. And when you're a small business owner, you can have separate bank accounts for the business finances or the home finances. But how you feel about yourself, how the level of competency you have around yourself and money leaks into both sides. It's not a separate thing. So one of my clients was and not actively engaged in finances of his business because he had he wasn't confident in himself. He had some credit card debt. He had an issue around engaging with the financial system, and that blocked him from engaging actively in the finances of his business, which meant that he had a CFO to run it. The CFO wasn't great, but he wasn't engaged, so he didn't get involved with the CFO. The CFO lost some money. He felt even worse, and we reached the stage where his inability to engage with his personal finances and his business finances had reached a point where he luckily came to me and went, is there such a thing as a money coach? Once we'd sorted out his personal issues, he got right all over his business. He went through because he was no longer scared of money. It didn't terrify him. It didn't fill him with shame. He was released from self-judgment. Because fundamentally, most people have never been shown how to manage their finances. And so when it goes wrong, as it will do, because it's not a straightforward thing, and we don't understand our relationship with money, we tend to internalize it. So we go from this position where we go, why can't I do this? Or how do I do this? Why can't I do this? Why is this so hard? To, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me that I can't do this? Now, when you start to internalize that there's something wrong with you, then you're essentially blocking yourself from being able to fix it, because that's shame. That means you're not going to go out and talk to someone about it. And when you can't talk to someone about it, you can't put any context around it. Now, when you start with the position that actually the reason you can't do this is nothing to do with you, it's because no one ever showed you how to do it, you can release yourself from that and go, okay, all right, I'm not broken, nothing wrong with me, no one showed me how to do this. It went wrong, I ended up with some debt, I made a few spending decisions, but everyone around me had $6,000 in credit card debt or whatever else it is, so in that sense it was kind of normalized, but no one showed me how to do it, and it's not going to go right. This is the fundamental thing around teaching people to trade. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you what your job is, but you need to teach people to trade because they need to understand what that process looks like, where the feedback from the market is not about them at the personal level. It's about understanding your decision-making process. It's feedback on your decision-making process. It doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you an unworthy person. It's just something you need to learn how to do, and someone needs to guide you and show you how to do it. And that's the same with our personal finances. Most people find that really helpful as a context and as a starting place to go, okay, you know what? No one showed me how to do this. Now, the thing with the personal finances, it's not that we start with a blank slate. We start with all of the fears and guilt and everything that people around us poured into us over our childhood. So I went through life with all my father's money anxieties in me. And I've had to do a lot of work to take those to pieces and forgive myself and forgive him for that kind of subconscious programming that goes into us. So how I feel about myself, how I feel about money, and how I feel about money and myself was entirely dictated, or, it's subsumed at the subconscious level during my childhood. Taking that to pieces, understanding that, starting with self-compassion, allows me to go, okay, all right, some things scare you. Now I know where that came from. Doesn't make me a bad person. Doesn't make me an incomplete person. Now I've got the power to choose a different response to the same stimulus around anxiety. And now I can change that for the better.
I think it's a very interesting point you make from a compassionate point of view. I was at a conference once with Paul Gilbert, who's professor of sort of compassion, done a lot of good work on it. I remember there was a point when he was trying to work out what people thought about money. And he put this question to the audience, which was a question around about, I want people to visualize what a number between 0 and 1,000 and the concept of numbers. And he asked people to sort of describe what they then came about as sort of a conclusion to that. And what was interesting is that some people were looking at spirals, people were looking at some horizontal relationship of numbers. Some people had some image of something relating to a number. Some people have the number itself. And you start to realize that once we talk about, numbers and money, we may all be talking a very, very different language to each other, because our perspective of a number, which relates to, in the end, money, could be really, really different between people.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And also what that number means. So,
absolutely, yeah.
So in the sense of, if you look at, the financial advisory process and the financial planning process, it's all about numbers. It's a linear process around kind of, what number do you need to get to? What number have you got to start with? And then we'll plug it into our cash flow modeling and out you come. Safety is not a number. So our brains, I think, are primarily wired around safety. I mean, you can call it fear, you can call it safety. It's the same thing. Safety is not a number, it's a feeling. Safety is what I feel when I am supported, when I feel that I have control over my future, when I feel that I can predict my future. And so is that a number? No, it's not. But our society is set up around numbers, around net worth, around self-worth equals net worth, and so it's that thing that threads its way all the way through without actually, as you pointed out, numbers even visually mean different things to different people, but it's not if you have money worries, there's no number that's going to make you feel better, because numbers are essentially extrinsic, whereas the feeling of safety is an internal thing. It's an emotion.
Yeah, and indeed, and perhaps having lots of money doesn't necessarily give you the solution either. It could be as bad as not having enough money.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of work in this area, and so beyond a certain point, you don't feel any more secure if you have the capacity or the financial capacity to meet your necessities in life, and to feel safe, as in, I've got a salary coming in at the end of the month. It's going to be enough to pay for the mortgage, the bills, the car loan, or and whatever we spend on the kids. Then there's a level of security around that, and so it's also about how you feel about yourself. So if you are comfortable in yourself, in the sense that you don't measure your self-worth by what's in your bank or what's parked in the drive of the house, then you're not going to end up on that hedonic treadmill where what other people are driving or other people are wearing and all that messaging from society is not going to impact you negatively. So one of the things that really I find challenging around the messaging about what you need to drive this, wear this, all those things, they'll make you happy, they'll make you rich, they'll make you beautiful. All of those things have a subtext message, which is, if you don't drive this, wear this, have this phone, you're not good enough. Thousands of messages bombarding us, and we're very sensitive to this stuff. Our brains are wired to be sensitive around self-worth, because self-worth, we're social hierarchical mammals. These things, these messages resonate with us. And if we are vulnerable to self-doubt or lack of self-agency or lack of agency, then all this stuff just comes at you all the time and makes you feel that you are not good enough at all. And if you can't afford this, you're not good enough. And so, yeah, it's challenging. And I don't see anything that really addresses that.
Can I jump in there? Because hearing you, you're probably seeing me shaking my head ferociously, like a nutter back here, because we can see each other. Not only am I agreeing with everything you're saying, but you're putting it so well and so powerfully. And, to our audience, we've got to come up with a title for this podcast. And as I think it, as I'm hearing it, I've been writing it down. How our relationship with money shapes our trading behaviours. It is so central to what we are. And, you know, money is, it is so central to our being. You know, we often say it's just money. It's not. It's more than that. It's a representation of something. You know, it's a representation of our success. It's a representation of our failure. It's a representation of comparison to other people. And even if it's not true, it's often how we feel. You know, and you know, it's that bit that corrupts us. I mean, I was making notes as you were talking about this, and I'm thinking, well, you know, we start with this. What do we need to do to succeed at trading? What are the processes we need to do? What are the systems we need to put into place? What are the practices which we have, which are part of our structure and our system, and which we will evolve as we do more and more time in trading? But in other words, there are a series of processes that we need to do to be able to win and not lose. It's trading has got two elements to it. One, hold on to your capital, and then two, compound it. Okay. And then do it in a way that's strong enough to eventually earn a living or to produce a return for people who give you money to invest for them and manage for them. And then what happens is exactly what you kind of described. We start losing ourselves a little bit and focusing on the money and making comparisons and looking at, well, that guy's made more than me today, or that person on social media has written about how much they've made, or they put the winning trade on and I didn't. And look at me, I'm a bit of an idiot. I'm a bit of a failure. I'm flawed, you know. And then comes the self-judgment, and then comes the shame.
Yeah, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me?
And then comes the changing your process and micromanaging your process instead of doing what you should be doing. You know, a little bit like you said, it's the comparison was like, wow, you know, you're doing this with small business people. I hope you're going to be doing it at some point with traders and investors as well, because I know you've been a trader in your past life and you've worked around traders for the best part of nearly 3 decades as well. But it's also connected. It's also simple when it comes down to it, although so difficult to fix. But a starting point is becoming aware of it, talking about it, and realizing it. And it's just powerful.
Yeah. So at a fundamental level, money helps us meet our core security needs. And you can define those using Maslow's hierarchy or whatever you want. But fundamentally, as social hierarchical mammals, our core security needs are food, shelter, sex, and social acceptance. And money meets those needs. So if you look at food, shelter, sex, social acceptance, the processes that through which we understand and react to threats to those needs are really, really deep-seated, deep-rooted. And staying safe as an evolutionary strategy keeps a species alive. Staying safe means staying out of trouble and getting your core security needs met. And so our brains watch out for danger. They predict danger all the time. They try and keep us safe. And so these responses are very, very hardwired into us because that's what keeps mammals alive as a species. And so when you throw money in and money then becomes a core security need, our behavior around money becomes very, very reactionary, very instinctive. And it's difficult to step back from that. So as you just said, you know, if I have a bad day trading, does that make me a bad person? Does it make me a failure? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose my wife? Am I going to lose my family? You know, because we won't be able to afford this. The brain can spiral off into this catastrophizing space really, really quickly because it's a matter of life or death and has been for a number of years. Social exclusion and social hierarchy is massively hardwired into mammals. Not lizards. Lizards don't have to worry about that because they're not particularly social. But we are. And so self-judgment or the worry of judgment of others around self triggers people massively. And yeah, whether that's I don't have the right watch or I don't have the right car or what will people think of me, down to I've had a really crap day trading. That process is hardwired and it hijacks your ability to think rationally through a situation. And once the cortisol starts flooding, you get this. You must know what this cognitive narrowing process, where your ability to see and hear and focus on what you're doing is just massively hijacked by what's going on in your brain. And it's the same process whether people are scared by credit card bills or people. I didn't look at bank statements for a couple of years. I was overtaken by anxiety, and what that did for me was like, if I don't look at the numbers, then they can't scare me. Now, my imagination scared me, but the numbers didn't. I had it the wrong way around. I got on top of it, but I was stuck in that period for time of being worried about my finances. I didn't have a job. I was trying to build a house, and everything was quite challenging at that period of time. So I just ignored it and got on top of anyone who spent any money in my house.
Something which I'm just hearing you say that, and I'm thinking of when I go back to when I was a trader, and which I think nearly every trader listening will resonate with, is seeing your P&L performance appear on the screen in real time as a number. It just corrupts your trading to the most horrendous degree. And I know a lot of people that, if they had an option to remove it from their screen, they would. They wouldn't even, they wouldn't look till the very end of the day. If they couldn't get rid of it, they put a sticker over it. And we know it's there. We know it's real. We know whether we're making or losing money. It's not just when we're losing; it's when we're making as well. It's the same thing. We don't want to see how much we're making, because there is that instant impact connection to seeing the money numbers in real time. When we see it real, if we're making, let's say we're making, depending on the size of your capital, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 on a day. In your head, it. You're mentally calculating it. Once you see it in hard writing, it becomes real. And the tendency there might be, I'm going to lock it in. And then you might miss out because really your target might have been 5 times the level. So immediately it corrupts you and takes you off process.
That's right. It hijacks your process. It hijacks your trading plan. And it hijacks you if you look at a bill and go, oh my God, what am I going to do with that? I'm going to end up on the streets. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose my wife. It sounds ridiculous, but the process that the brain is going through is exactly the same. It's hijacking its ability to rationally deal with the situation. And I think the important thing to remember here is that rationally dealing with it is not what we were designed for. There's some great theories around what the brain was designed for, and thinking isn't one of them. We can use it to think, but the primary function of the brain is to keep us alive. And that means being very alert to potential dangers. And then if you see danger, or if the brain predicts danger based on previous patterns, it's going to send out danger signals. And that's going to mess with your head in the broadest sense of the word, and that's going to mess with your ability to trade. It's going to, as you say, it's going to make you want to keep your losses. It's going to make you go, oh, let's lock that in, great, as opposed to this is stage 1 in a 5-stage process. This is a validation of my trading strategy.
And like you said, that self-esteem is almost the final, for those who aren't familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'm sure most of you will have seen it at some point somewhere. It's a pyramid with 5 different layers going up from the bottom to the top of needs that we have to fulfill, and things that we're deficient in that we need to satisfy. And the penultimate one, the one before the top, is self-esteem needs, which is often, I think, the higher you go in it, the more likely you are, in my opinion, to succeed. Because if you get to that very top need, which is self-actualization or self-fulfillment, that's where you need to be in order to succeed, I think, in most areas of life and trading. But there's one big barrier before you get there, which is self-esteem, which I think we all have in some way. And money and self-esteem are so closely linked. And I'm thinking now also that the paragraph in Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, which perfectly captures this, is the man in the car paragraph.
Yeah. The man in the car that thinks everyone's looking at him.
Yeah, the man in the car paradox, I think, which is literally a 2-page paragraph, and yet the most powerful part of the book. But it so closely relates to that, our need for self-esteem and to make ourselves, I don't know if it's to look good, but it's certainly to feel good, even if people aren't looking, to make you think they're looking.
Yeah, hierarchy is important. Where you are in the hierarchy is massively important from an evolutionary perspective. Because higher up you are, the greater access you have to mating opportunities, food, stuff like that. And I mean, it sounds kind of very basic, but it's actually, we're not that far removed. So 12,000 odd years ago, we started agriculture or domesticating animals and grasses. But up until then, things hadn't changed a great deal. So we still have those Neolithic brains, but our environment, we've changed our environment massively, and it's at an accelerating rate. So there's this concept of the EEA, which is the evolutionary adapted environment, which is what us as humans, including our brains, mainly our brains, were adapted for. What we do now in extreme circumstances, sitting in front of screens, clicking on blips, is about as far removed from our evolutionary environment, evolutionary adapted environment as is possible. So actually, you've got to understand that is not what we were designed for, and respect that. And also, the flip side of that is, when it goes wrong, have compassion on yourself. This is not what we were designed for. We can do it, but it's not what we were designed for, which means that as you know, you need to maintain discipline, you need to have structure, you need to have guidance, you need to have support to do that. So yeah, if you went into space, you'd have a whole team supporting you, because you're not designed to be in space. That guy Felix Baumgartner that set the record, I watched the program on that. Fascinating, right? But look at the team. I mean, it took them 7-10 years. Look at the team to keep a man alive in an environment that he was not designed for. And then ask yourself, okay, fine, from a mental perspective, and that include mental, physical, a whole bunch of things, right? Not just about the suit. And then ask yourself, okay, well, there's nothing in evolution that prepared us for working in trading environments. So what support mechanisms do we need to survive in that, and to prosper in that, and to feel good in that? In our childhoods, because parenting is just a strange thing that you kind of fumble your way through. I think by the time you get to grandparents, you've got a much better idea, or maybe the third child or the fourth child or whatever. But so many times we get the messaging of, why don't you understand this? What's wrong with you? Why can't you get this? This is really simple. What's wrong with you? Why did you do that? Have you no shame? All those things are messaging us. And I'm not blaming my parents for this or anything. It's just a factor of kind of, it's almost kind of the what do you call the curse of knowledge, where you forget what it's like to learn something for the first time in your life. And so you're trying to communicate with someone who's 5 or 4, but it's like, why don't you understand that? What's wrong with you? And so all this messaging about, if I don't understand this, if I can't do this, if I'm bad at this, there must be something wrong with me, can get hardwired in. And now if there's something wrong with me, then potentially I'm under social threat in this social hierarchically organized society. And so I need to make sure no one finds out about that, and preferably not even myself. So then you get into shame, then you get into denial, and it can pop up anywhere. Pops up all the time. So look at the world we live in with influencers and tweets and all this stuff to remind us that we're not good enough. Where is the messaging that says you are enough in yourself? Nowhere.
We will return to the podcast shortly. First, a quick word about our podcast sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA. We are delighted to be able to promote their brilliant STA Technical Analysis Home Study course. Listeners to the Alpha podcast interested in studying for the Home Study course can get an exclusive discount by visiting the Alpha blog page, where they can find a link to the Home Study course at the top of the page. Go to alphamindblog.blogspot.com or just Google Alpha blog. Now back to this week's podcast.
So where's the hack? If someone's out there that's getting triggered regularly by tuning into the wrong channels, and of course, most channels you tune into could arguably be the wrong channel, as we know from the Instas and the Twitters and the things that I don't even know that are out there that are winding people up. But what's the hack? Is the hack just to turn it off?
There's this concept of choice architecture. Organize your environment to support the choices you want to make. The people that succeed in life aren't those that are massively good at resisting temptation. They just organize their lives so they don't put, temptation in the way of whatever they're going to get to, right? If you want to lose weight, don't put a cake in the fridge and then go, so I'll put it on the bottom shelf, I won't see it. It doesn't work, right? Don't buy cake. And so that sounds a bit flippant, but recognize where you get tripped up. Recognize that if you spend 20 minutes on Twitter, you're probably going to come out of it quite angry, and that's not good for you. Then lose Twitter. Now you can go on Twitter, and maybe you've got a different set of feeds, and you come out of it fulfilled, inspired by all the beautiful things that people have posted. Great, that it's good for you. Your body is giving you constant feedback around things that are good for you and things that are bad for you. And we understand that through words like discomfort. Discomfort is showing you where you're not free in that particular space. There's a great guy called Peter Crone, and he's this really succinct statement, which is life will present you with people and situations that show you where you are not free. See it for what it is, forgive yourself, and then decide what you're going to do about it. I've paraphrased the second bit because I can't remember it. But what it's saying is discomfort. That's telling me something about myself. This decision is difficult. There's some discomfort in there. What's that telling me about what I need to do? So it's about curiosity around yourself. It's about leaning into discomfort and looking at ways that you're going to, face up to that. I don't think that we get shown this. I don't think in our education system teaches people how to think, teaches people how to learn, and teaches people how to listen. So we're not well equipped to go into the world. All we are is bombarded with messages that say we're not good enough. So yes, you're right in the sense, switch off the feeds, but also, ask yourself, what is this doing? Do I feel better for this situation? Yes or no? And if you're not feeling better because of Twitter or TV, recognize what it's designed to do. What is the news designed to do? If you watch it on TV, it's designed to hijack your attention and bombard you with information to get a reaction out of you. What is most stuff? What are these notifications, these pings, these squeaks designed to do? They're designed to grab your attention, and a lot of it is designed to basically get some kind of brainstem reaction out of you. And there's two things that do that. One is greed and the other one is fear. And which one works most? Fear. So we have a brain that is always looking to be safe, that is where fear is not the dominant operating system, but trying to stay safe as a dominant operating system. And yet we live in an environment where fear of not having enough, fear of not being enough is thrown at us continuously. And then some people put themselves into a trading environment, which is the ultimate feedback mechanism for for that. It's there in front of you, your P&L.
But it's like, I mean, I can't help making the comparison between being in a trading environment every day and walking into a casino in Las Vegas, where you've got the lights going off and the bells ringing, and and you just lose touch with reality in time. And it's almost the ultimate money environment, designed to make you lose discipline, take chances where the odds are against you, and look for instant gratification. And I was,
Sure.
As you were talking just now, I was thinking about the idea of instant gratification. And as a money coach, I'm assuming that is something that you must have to deal with regularly, or at least it comes into your conversations in some form.
Yeah, in the sense that if you're looking, so we as humans, we get positive emotions from oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin. So dopamine is the reward neurotransmitter. It's the one that gets us to do things, expend a little bit more energy, and it's the one that makes us feel most good. We get serotonin is the pride neurotransmitter. It's the one that when people say to you, Steve, that was fantastic, thank you so much for your help, that's what you feel in you. And oxytocin is the bonding one. And they're all they're a reward system for things that help us survive. And that's all tied back into the concept of the fact that we're social hierarchical mammals. What tends to happen is that people who are looking for one or all of those can find them in drugs, and they can also find them in other activities. So gambling will stimulate dopamine, right? The interesting thing about gambling and dopamine is that it's not the reward itself that gets the dopamine going, it's the anticipation of the reward. It's also something that people do on late night shopping. Great, I'm going to look fantastic in that. Or, that's a really, nice piece of kit. I'm going to look fantastic with that. So you get a double hit. You get the hit from the anticipation of how fantastic you're going to feel when this thing arrives. And then also you get to unpack the box. So you also get a second hit, for when it arrives. So that's a dopaminic type of urge that people have. Underlying all of that, though, is what is the need? So from a money coaching perspective, the question is, you are using a financial strategy to meet an emotional need. What is that emotional need? There's a guy called Gabor Mate, who's, if you've never come across him, is brilliant. He's a psychologist. He's worked with drug addicts in Vancouver for 20, 30 years. And he asks the simple question, which is, don't ask about the addiction, ask about the pain. What is the addiction masking? What is the pain that individual feels that they are using whatever it is that they're using for? And that could be a shopping addiction, or it could be a heroin addiction, or anything that an individual is using to mask some kind of pain, to meet some kind of need, to feel safe, to feel good about themselves. So when you look at kind of spending, unhealthy levels of spending, it's about what's driving that. And what's driving that is, how do you feel about yourself?
And I think there's so much of that comes into trading, when, you are constantly judging yourself against others, and your initial drive for it is for a quick reward. And I think often there's that, I want to be better than, I want to prove someone right. I want to be better than that person. I want to show my teacher at school that I'm not the idiot that he thought I was. Or, the guy at school the guys always seem to have more money in the bigger cars. And it's driving us. And often it can be powerful as a driver and motivator if it's in the right place, but can be equally damaging when it's in the wrong place, because it takes us off the things we need to do to win, to succeed. And this is where, I'm bringing together some of the things you've been saying, which is that, if you do things and you kind of follow a process, you can build your money up and you can accumulate, whether you're running a business, whether you're in trading, or whether you're in some aspect of life, investing, whatever, that if you follow a certain path and a right way to do it, there's a way where you can build money. And it's going to take time. There's going to be delayed gratification as part of that process. But it will come if you follow the good behaviours, good practices, good processes. But what happens is everyone wants it now. Everyone wants it tomorrow. People don't want to wait. They think there's a shortcut. The bells and the lights are flashing and they can see it.
Sure.
And, the yellow Lamborghini is, they're thinking in their head, where am I going to park my Lamborghini next year? Because all I need to do is get one of these right in a huge way. And it's there. It's a lottery ticket. So almost they go to a lottery ticket mindset and give it a much higher chance of happening than it's ever realistically got a chance, because they've heard a story that someone somewhere out of 20 million people bought GameStop and made ridiculous money on it, or bought Doge or bought Bitcoin, or, they've heard a story of someone who made a lot of money. They don't know that person. It might be a fabrication. It may not. The press may have latched onto it. Someone effectively won the lottery ticket and they think, I can do that. And they lose all sense of purpose, all sense of balance, all sense of process, and it completely corrupts their trading processes. Discipline goes out the window, and at the back of their mind is that Lamborghini, or maybe, something that says, look at me, look how great I am, look how successful I am, dopamine reward.
So what's, and maybe this isn't the right way to ask the question, but I'll ask anyway. What's the biggest challenge? Helping people to deal with the process of losses, or stopping people from taking profits?
I actually think they're both two sides of the same coin. It's bringing together some sort of, it's almost getting back, like you said, no one teaches us this. We have to find out in life. So there's, there must be so many people I've known, and I include myself, who said, God, if I only knew what I know now in my 50s, when I was 20 starting out in this job, Sure. And it's unfortunately, most people have burnt through their trading cash by the time they're even halfway or quarter way to that, on that journey. And there is that, if you can get that proper training or mentorship, but, we're not helped by the people who are leading us into trading are often brokers who are trying to attract people, effectively the casinos, the market.
You mean they're not our friends? I thought that Triple Eight, all those guys were all here to help me get rich.
Yeah.
So if you ask yourself at a fundamental level, with a brain that basically looks at the world and says, the only future that matters is the one that you're alive to see. Now, is that going to dominate? Is that going to produce long-term thinking or short-term thinking?
Well, it should produce long-term thinking, and it does when we talk about it. And I imagine this is part of my challenge. This is part of my challenge when I coach traders. And I know Mark has also spoken about this when you've coached traders, that you talk about it, but then they go away and they completely forget it.
Right, because they're hijacked by the reality of the situation they're in, which is, oh my God, what am I going to do now?
It takes time to embed change.
What you're saying there also is the concept of time. It's the speed to something that becomes important. And some people get stuck into the fact that if they look back, all they've done is wasted time waiting for something that never actually happened. And their frustration is around the fact that, they've wasted the time, but because they've spent so much effort in that trap of waiting for that profit, or waiting for the 100% of a trade profitability, that what they've missed out upon, of course, is the whole sense of balance. So their life per se, whilst the time has been enveloped into a trade, they could have spent a lot more time considering their balance and their relationship with life in general and their purpose. And I think it's come through several times that purpose becomes so significant. If you've lost the sense of purpose, lost the sense of self-worth, and are stuck in this time-constrained, I need to make money by mindset, and you just can't escape from that, then you need to stop what you're doing and reset and recalibrate yourself, because you're never going to achieve these aims and these dreams. And sometimes the dreams can be too big. The dreams can be so big, that desire to get something, where the mouse, and I'm holding up a mouse here, suddenly becomes so available. It becomes so available to trade now compared to the 80s when we were doing trade. It's so easy to trade what you like, and to almost to waste time and maybe not even notice time. Hours pass by and you've done 8 hours of just looking at a screen. And I always, in my sort of coaching relationships, remind people that you don't want to get to 85 years of age and someone says to you, so what have you been doing for the last 85 years? And say, well, I've been staring at a screen trying to make money, rather than the concept of just getting out and connecting with nature. Because as you said, Dennis, the concept is that we are an animal at heart, and we've got all of these natural things that turn up to protect ourselves. And so we need to get back to that natural state and connect as much as possible to get that balance.
And in order to be healthy, and I would define that as in also to be happy, there are a few core things that we don't tend to think about very hard, like sleeping and breathing. Get those wrong, how great can your life ever be if you don't sleep properly, you don't breathe properly? We've allowed science to partition all these things out and go, okay, well, I'll breathe later, or I'll sleep when I'm dead, all this kind of mentality that these things are not important to our well-being. I just need to make that trade. And I think the ultimate example of this is the people that are stuck on the pokies just pissing where they are, because they're locked in the dopamine zone. And if you put a rat in a cage with a button that releases dopamine, it doesn't move. It just stays there. Now, whether you're talking about being driven by pleasure or driven by fear, or whatever, you're so right when you say you need to step back out of it. One of my biggest challenges from working from home is coming out of my office and joining the rest of the family. It's like, well, it's time to close the door. In fact, someone advised me, said, when you've come out of your office, close the door and don't go back into it. Don't go, oh, I just wonder if there's another email on. No, I just did this. Like, otherwise you find yourself in there all the time. So come back to designing your environment, to choice architecture, to make the choices. So many of our choices are subconscious. 80-something, 90% of them. I mean, there's some statistic that says you make 35,000 choices a day. I don't know how they measure that, but I know that I'm not making very many of those consciously myself. So are they making my future easier or more difficult? Are they taking me towards the person I want to be, or the person away from the person I want to be? And so we have these concepts of decision making. We go, right, new house, new job, new wife, whatever. I've got a fairly rigorous process for that. A formal process, I should say, better than rigorous. If I'm going to change my job, I'm going to do some research. I'm going to talk to my friends. I'm going to talk to other people in the industry. I'm going to do something around this, and I'm not going to rush into it tomorrow. And if I'm going to move house, or if I'm going to move country, or whatever, we have processes that allow us to get some feedback and do some research on this. Those are considered to be the big decisions in life. But actually, the decisions that are affecting us on a daily basis, that are compounding over 40 years, are the ones that we're doing subconsciously, our habits, right? Coming home from work and you're stressed, you could do a number of different things. You could have a beer, you could have a sleep, you could have a glass of wine, you could do meditation, you could do breathing exercise, you could walk with the dog, you could have a cup of tea with your wife, you could smoke a spliff, you could do all of these things. How many of them do we do consciously? How many of them do we go, okay, this is a habit. How many people chose those, or are they just things that just met a need at some point over time and you ended up doing them? And how many of them are taking you towards the person you want to be instead of away from the person you want to be? How many of those situations are making the future easier for you in terms of your health, maybe even your wealth, your marriage, your relationship with your kids? And how many of them aren't? So it's a bit kind of slightly off-piste on that one, but I think it still comes back to understanding your decision-making process in totality, not just necessarily around trading, because although I think that's very important, but around everything that you do. Recognize that 95% of your behavior is subconscious, and most of that is inherited, subconscious inheritance, and go, okay, fine. Is it working for me? I didn't choose it. No one chooses to be angry. No one chooses to be ashamed. No one chooses those emotions. And are they working for you? So you can forgive yourself and you could just look at it and go, so particularly around, personal finance in my space, and go, okay, no, you don't choose those emotions. They come up for you.
Dennis, there's so many powerful messages in what you've said today. And it's been very eloquently put. And I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are thinking, he's really got it. He's really on it there. But how could this knowledge, this information, and even how could working with a coach such as yourself, a money coach, how could it change me? It's interesting to know. But that's one thing. But the hardest part is change. And, Mark made a really interesting point. What is the hack? And you again, you said, behavioral architecture. You call it choice architecture. I often call it behavioral architecture, but I think they're part of the same thing. Redesigning your how you are, your time, your space, everything can be really useful.
Right.
Well, as coaches, we're change agents. We're agents to catalyze some sort of transformation. What do you do to help people make that transformation so it's not just a story? It moves beyond that into helping them to become better with their money, or to become better in a way which helps them then become better at their money. What do you do?
I start by explaining essentially their neurological wiring. This is what your brain is trying to do. This is the reason you are anxious. This is what the brain does. It tries to keep you safe. And that's what it's designed for. It's not designed for long-term thinking. It's not designed for compounding. It's not designed for any of this stuff. It's designed to keep you safe. Secondly, how did it get wired in your childhood? What were the messages you received in your childhood about yourself and about money and yourself? So if you grew up in a household where people went, oh, we don't talk about money, it's the root of all evil, and we just don't do that here, then you create a void in that person's understanding of money, and so it can be filled with any kind of crap, because you're basically not showing them how to have a healthy relationship with something. We understand this around food and body shaming and all of that stuff. So picking those messages apart allows people to go, oh, right, now I understand why I feel that. Now I know it. I didn't choose that. It just came from either directly from one of my parents or my environment or my guardians, or as a reaction to. So if you've got people that grew up and they were in the household and they were always penny pinching and really mean and everything, then an individual can come out of that going, you know what, when I grow up, I'm never going to do that. And you come up with the opposite relationship with money. And I think what that does is, or I know what that does is, it creates a little bit of space, as Frankl would say, between stimulus and response. And in that space lies our choice. So you learn, or people learn, to forgive themselves. When you're less judgmental, you can go, okay, so I'm not broken. I just had some bad messaging about myself and money when I was growing up, I will now choose to release myself from this stuff, and I would choose something different. I would choose a different response when this comes up. So if I look at my bank statement, if I'm scared to look at my bank statement because I don't think there's enough money in there, and if there's not enough money in there, then I don't feel like I'm enough of a person, I can go slowly, mind, but this is not what I'm, I can choose a different answer. I can choose a different response to this. If I can disconnect my net self-worth from what it says in the bank balance or what it says on the credit card statement, then I can start to move forward. Then I can engage with my finances. And I don't view that as any reflection on my worth as an individual, on who I am, on I'm not good enough or I'm not whole enough. And then you can engage with stuff that used to scare you. And when you can do that, you set up a positive reinforcement mechanism and people can move forward. And it works. It really works. It's the same thing as being scared about anything that other people made you scared about, whether it's a bungee jump or whether it's cycling or whatever. There are things that we are scared of, scared to go near. Our brains are triggered around it. And when they're triggered around it, we can no longer think rationally. You see this all the time. So what you're teaching someone to do is faced with a trading situation. How do I think rationally now about this, as opposed to worrying about my ego, my P&L, my marriage, the plan? How do I engage with this process rationally and use what people will want to call, the conscious cognitive processes rather than reactive processes? Because reactive processes will always be safety orientated. And essentially that's fight or flight or freeze. None of those are great actions, right? Not in front of a screen or even in the house or wherever it is. Fight, flight or freeze does not work with your finances. But that's what your brain's programmed to react when it predicts a threat. If you grew up in a household where there was always arguments about money and shouting about money, money then gets associated with pain and distress and arguments and shame. All those things get wired up around money, and you won't be able to think about money without those things coming up for you unless you're shown how to break that link between your subconscious inheritance and who you want to be. So we look at learning, and what is learning to us now? We look at learning and it's, okay, we use conscious cognitive processes. Vast amounts of information are presented to us, and we try and memorize most of it, right? That's how we communicate with words. We read books, we watch videos, and we try and regurgitate this stuff. But children don't learn with words. They learn with behaviors, and they learn with reactions. And so this is the stuff that gets hardwired.
And that's interesting. Interesting because, recently I get a lot of messages, direct messages on Twitter. I suffer this, or this is happening. Could you give me a quick, easy answer to this lifelong problem? in 42.
Start age 3 and try a different
in 243 characters or less. But it is fascinating that we're not even conscious of this source of where these pains come from that affect our behaviours. I'm mindful of someone who said that every time I make money, I seem to get bitter and angry. And what you were talking about could be one of the explanations for that. Perhaps there was always an argument over money whenever it was abundant in the house when they were young and they witnessed that. Who knows? We don't know. But there are these unconscious, invisible binds to things that we experienced often when we were young.
And think about the process that goes on when someone says, if I get this, I'll be happy. And then they get this and they're not happy. How does that make somebody feel? Right? Oh dear, there's something wrong with my worldview. Oh, maybe I need 2x, or maybe I need 10x, or maybe I need another one. And then I'll be happy, right? Because the focus on extrinsic activity, extrinsic rewards. We're not taught how to do that. Even at the basic level, if you think about how humans live for thousands and thousands of years, we don't live like that anymore. We don't live in villages. We don't live in tribes. And I'm not trying to make some kind of argument for bucolic happiness, because let's face it, life wasn't necessarily that much nicer in those days before we had antibiotics and all of that stuff. But the material world is ultimately unsatisfying from the way that our biology is. So yeah, does that answer your question in terms of how people can learn to master what's going on in their heads around themselves and money?
It certainly, well, I would say it doesn't answer my question. It brings up more interesting. It brings it exposes what I was trying to bring to the open, into the open perfectly. So I wasn't looking for a close question there. So so
if you think of it as giving someone a really powerful car without telling them how to drive, how's that going to go? Yeah. Right, they're going to crash.
Yeah. So even when they get the Lamborghini, it's going to go horribly wrong.
Right, and they're going to keep crashing, and then going, well, maybe if I got a faster car, I would crash less.
Self-drive car. Listen,
so your brain's like a tractor. It's designed for one thing. It won't work so well if you're trying to do 24-hour Le Mans with it.
I'm very mindful at the time, and I don't know if you've got any more questions, Mark, that you'd like to ask, and if not, maybe you can just give people, the audience, a little bit more knowledge of how they could contact you if they were more interested about what you do. So, but I'll hand over to you first, Mark.
Sure, Ben. It's been a fantastic chat. Really grateful, Dennis, for your time. And of course, I think the fundamental point is that whilst we're all the same, we're all incredibly different. We all see things different, where our pressures come from, where our education is derived from, where our relationship with money has come from. Old money, new money, super new money in this new world. We've all got this relationship. And that fundamental problem is the same, where we have this fight, flight, freeze, or even faint. And I've seen all of those in trading environments. I've seen someone walked out in a rigor mortis position because it got so bad. So we know that markets are horrific. We know that markets are all about the language of money. I remember one particular portfolio manager I was coaching was getting stressed because his risk team were talking to him in dollar numbers, and he was measuring himself on percentage of portfolio return. And one thing was like super sensitizing his values, and he just wanted to know percentage, but he was given this noise, and it created this real drama and a real stress point for him, because it was a trigger. It triggered him, and he didn't need to be triggered, because actually everything was all right. Everything was going well if you looked at the portfolio. So I think, Dennis, we've learned so much, and it'd be great to have you back at some point. We wish you incredible well. It's very important at the moment, as we're coming out of the pandemic, of now working out what money is again, of course.
Absolutely.
And we've got some things to spend it upon. So if you perhaps can tell people where they can get in touch with you and where they can find your great work, I think that'd be great for us.
Thank you very much indeed. I've really enjoyed talking to you today. I think, if I was to sum it up about what coaching is, and particularly money coaching is, it's giving people a safe space to talk about things that they find really scary. And if you can do that, then people find themselves able to deal with their issues. So you can find me at cambridgemoneycoaching.uk. That's one word, cambridgemoneycoaching.uk. That's my website. There's various blogs on there and various details of the services I offer individual coaching, money coaching for couples. I do financial wellbeing courses for employers, and I do a training course for financial advisors and financial planners who want to understand about how their clients are thinking about money. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And yeah, please reach out. I'd love to talk about what I do, and I love to show people that money is something that we can talk about and we need to talk about. Thank you very much.
That's fantastic, Dennis. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this week's Alpha Mind podcast. If you have enjoyed this podcast or any of our past podcasts, we would be delighted if you could rate the podcast on whichever service you use, or even better, leave a review. Thank you also to our podcast sponsor, the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA. You can go to technicalanalysts.com to find out more about their services and to explore becoming a member of the STA. As a reminder, at Alpha Mind, we focus on trader and investor personal growth and development. We offer coaching programs which are geared towards developing the key human, personal and behavioural skills that are so vital in helping people grow their performance and take their trading or investing to a higher level. Our clients come from a range of backgrounds from across the world. These include leading portfolio managers working at some of the world's largest hedge funds, asset management firms and sovereign wealth funds. We also work with investment banks and some of the world's largest commodity and energy trading businesses. Our clients also come from a myriad of other backgrounds, including family offices, proprietary trading firms, as well as many serious private retail traders. In addition to trade and investor coaching, our services extend to executive, leadership and team coaching with a specialist focus on financial markets, investment and risk businesses. To know more about our services, visit our webpage alpha-mind.net or email us info@alpha-mind.net or visit the Alpha Mind blog page for more contact information. If you would like to sign up for our regular newsletter, you can do so on the page link at the top of the Alpha Mind blog, and you can also listen to our podcasts on our new Alpha Mind YouTube channel. Finally, you can follow us and connect with us on social media. We are active on LinkedIn in our own names, Stephen Goldstein and Mark Randall, or through the Alpha Mind group on LinkedIn, which has over 15,000 members. You can also follow us on Twitter. Our handles are Alpha Mind 101 and Alpha Mind 102. We wish you well, stay safe and have a great week.